Welcome to KDKP Noir. I'm K Noir, and today we're talking the follow-up from Danielle's exit from New Jeans and Ador's response. When we learned that she was going to be the one that was going to be exiting New Jeans and not returning, we knew there was some additional follow-up that was going to occur. Since then, we have learned that Ador's response is not only pursuing Danielle and her family, but this includes Min Hee Jin as well. Now, this seems like a compilation of things that have occurred over in the past year. A lot of people said this stipulated from Danielle's outside activities, as when the other members have returned and or were in talks to return, she was still doing other activities outside of New Jeans. And then there were additional comments that were being made allegedly by her, members of her family, specifically her sister, is that when you have those type of discussions and they are outside of what you are discussing legally, that can lead into things such as damages for defamation of character, breach of contract. Oh my God, the list can go on. And that seems to be what occurred with Ador. Ador specifically addresses the damages that they are pursuing Danielle for. The damages and defamation that they are talking about with a breach of contract and so forth kind of alludes to the fact that there was a problem with those statements that were made. It also equates to what we have since learned in a monetary amount, as in US dollars, almost 30 to 38 million dollars. That's a lot of currency for those items that they're pursuing. That's typical in this type of industry. Now, in regards to Min Hee Jin's part in that, they're saying that Min Hee Jin kind of propelled all this into motion when she encouraged these girls to terminate their contract. In addition to that, the termination, it seems that she had been advising Danielle still, possibly her family members as well still, on how to pursue activities outside of Ador and outside of what they have currently stipulated in their contract. When things like that occur, that of course gets into these legal battles. And the legal battles can be so strenuous. I think we have seen over in the last year how these legal battles have just turned this whole industry upside down. Not only was it monumental for New Jeans to come out and say they were terminating their contract in the manner in which they did it, it was monumental in how it occurred, with them having a press conference and all the news activities, and then the legal battles that ensued for them as well as Min Hee Jin, and how it all kind of, conspired in court. Now, to see over in the past year that none of those battles, although they were long, were in favor of Min Hee Jin at the end of the day, because the court actually came back and validated that their contract was going to remain valid. And so when you have that of course is a breach if you continue to do it. That, of course, if you continue to talk outside of that contract or anything that is defaming on members that are still in there or the company or the label itself, that's called defamation. And that gets into a whole lot of legality. So I understand what the response was from Ador and why they responded as such. Now, as in including her parents, Danielle, if I'm not mistaken, is still a minor. So that would get into why the parents were there. As in including the sister, I understand because the sister was making comments that defamed what that was supposed to be. She was speaking on behalf of her sister. It's kind of good not to say anything because that does lead into the defamation. Now, when you get into the Min Hee Jin part of that, I'm still at a question mark about that because court battle after court battle after court battle and the court substantiating that the contract was valid, why those conversations were continuing to occur with her. And while she was, continuing to encourage Danielle or Minji and or others, it appears that Honey, Haven, and Hayen are all back. I like to call them the H3 girls because they're all back to business. However, Minji is still negotiating her contract, or still is in discussions with Ador as to how she will return. At this point, again, I don't know how that's going to play out. She evidently, Min Hee Jin, has a lot of influence over these girls. However, from a legal perspective, that could be dangerous because it leaves them at an awkward disposition that leaves, everyone vulnerable to the legalities that will follow that. As for Danielle and her family, $30 to $38 million is a lot of money. That Danielle, from what we understand, and her family is they are looking at legal representation right now to try to fight this. We do hope that it just kind of leads to a positive outcome for everybody involved. I was hoping they would mutually separate, which means that they would come to an agreement as to, Danielle being able to exit the company because that was what she wanted to do, and they no longer wanted her as part of it, which was what they wanted to do, as to what that would be. And maybe not as hefty of a fine as it appears that it's going to be right now in the court records. I will say that with New Jeans and all the stuff that's happened in the last year, we got New Jeans with their contract disputes, Vicha, formerly known as Vicha, but now as Girl Set, but the members of Vicha, which was KJ, who bought out massive lawsuit, as we saw in Korea as well as in the States, against JYP, CBX, which is part of XO. And because of those contract disputes still lingering, they did not return with the group. Those disputes have just kind of catapulted, and you've seen a lot of heightened, press around them, but they catapulted the industry to do something different. This year, 2026, the contracts will change for K-pop trainees and new people coming into the industry. The heightened, just attention to all the stuff that has ensued over the last year has just brought this to the forefront, and we've seen where the contracts now will, help trainees to come in, and if they decide they want to cancel or walk out of the contract, they can do so, or within the time frame that is stipulated in the contract. So that gives a little bit of wiggle room for those people if they want to walk out of a K-pop, trainee contract, and do it without having all these hefty fines in them. They also are looking at what mental depression or mental instabilities are. And so now it is mental depression / etc. So which can include other items in there as well too. And I think that is huge because we do know that we have seen over the years how the mental stress of being an idol, very, profitable, but it can be brutal on the individual if they're not ready or cut out for that type of training. The new contracts, it also has the stipulation in there about the schools, that they need to get their schooling as well too. They can't force them to stop going to school, that they will continue to go to school, or have to make, arrangements for these new trainees to continue their schooling. Because of these new rulings, we'll start to see some of the tension kind of go away from what it has been over in the last year. As for Danielle and her family, I hope they get the legal support that they need. And I hope that New Jeans will be able to come back, whether it's as H3, as the girls I like to call them, or whether it includes Minji, who is their leader. But we will have to just wait and see how that goes. But in the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day.